Welcome to Moving People Forward with Mark Elfstrand. This program is a series of conversations on commonly seen challenges in everyday people's lives. We hope you'll be inspired by the stories you hear today. Perhaps you know of someone who would also benefit. Be sure to share the program link with a friend. Now, here's Mark.
There is an art to being a good conversationalist. However, when it comes to engaging others in a spiritual conversation, well, that road might be navigated a little more carefully. Many are aware that today we find ourselves in what is termed a post-Christian culture. Traditional methods of introducing people to pursue God by faith really have changed. Well, today you're going to hear from an entrepreneurial marketer and founder of 3 technology-related businesses who turned her attention to ministry some 20 years ago. And with me today on Moving People Forward is Mary Schaller. Mary has trained hundreds of leaders to start small groups for the spiritually curious. And Mary, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
It's good to be with you, Mark.
Well, you've had really quite a career path. How did the whole technology line of work get started for you?
Well, actually, I graduated with an undergraduate degree in psychology and thought I wanted to be in personnel, and ended up in human resources, and ended up in technology just by the fact that there was a job that became available that was a management training job. And so we lived in the Boston area at the time, and that was the high-tech 128 quarter at the time. And so got involved in some mini computer companies. That dates me, I know it. And then we moved out to California, where there was more high-tech, Silicon Valley. That was just the place to be. And I found that as I realized who I was, I'd been an entrepreneur as a child. I was the one who organized the backyard carnivals. And so I was just drawn to doing something that nobody had done before. And so,
well, since you were in Silicon Valley and in the Boston area as well, just give me your impression of one of the concerns in business about the glass ceiling for women. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think in high tech, where the need was so great for new entrepreneurs, that the glass ceiling was less than it was in standard corporate America.
I see.
Because if you had an idea and you could get some money, they didn't care whether you were male or female, black or white. You know,
make money.
As long as you could make money for them, they were willing to pluck it down. And I think it was actually more so open for women than almost any other form of business.
Yeah. Well, kind of as a follow-up to that, what do you see as the difference in the way the leadership styles, that the benefit that women bring into an environment like that in corporate leadership?
Well, I think generally speaking, women are a lot more intuitive and sensitive to what's going on in the culture.
Okay.
And as a result, they can see things maybe before, and this is a way overgeneralization, right, because there's men that break that stereotype, and there's women that don't fit that stereotype.
Right.
But women generally are highly relational. They're consumers. They see what's going on. The fact that they're also mothers have sometimes a little bit more intuition than a guy would. So it felt like there was just a lot of openness to anything that you could dream up.
Well, give us a snapshot of your spiritual journey.
Well, I grew up Catholic, 12 years of parochial school, and a lot of religion classes, but somehow I had missed the Jesus piece. And when I was 16, I was invited to a retreat for a weekend called Teens Encounter Christ that was sponsored by a group of charismatic Catholics that presented the gospel in such a compelling way that it was about belief, and it was about grace and the free gift that Jesus offers us. That all we have to do is receive it, and we can become a child of God. I had thought it was about really earning your way to salvation, and I knew I wasn't going to make it on the good works plan. And so when I heard that good news, I said, sign me up, because I knew I needed Jesus. And it was a personal crisis in my life going on at the time. My mother had been in a mental hospital for a period of time. And I needed something besides myself, and something that was way bigger than even my family could provide.
So what were the triggers in your life that caused you to take an interest on developing these conversations with people who believe differently?
Well, I was about to turn 50. I was in Silicon Valley. I'd already started 3 companies,
Yes.
had taken one public. My husband had also been an entrepreneur, and we had also seen some success from what he did.
Right.
And we were also growing substantially and exponentially in our own faith. We were in a really good church by that time. I married a Lutheran. Together, eventually we became Episcopalian, and then we ended up in this evangelical Presbyterian church in Menlo Park, California.
Okay.
And we had been invited to start to be on the lead staff of this large Presbyterian church, Menlo Park Presbyterian Church at the time. And here we were leading small groups as co-pastors with a group of 12 ordained Presbyterian pastors. And we found, our entrepreneurial skills were valued and invited.
Yeah.
But we were still on a path of maturity as believers ourselves. And I saw the power of small groups both in our own personal lives and in the lives of others that we were coaching. We had 400 small groups at the time.
Goodness.
And so all of this ended up showing me that small groups were a great venue for believers, but I'd been, asked about small groups for the unbeliever. Would that be something that would work to bring people into the church? Because people that don't believe are hesitant to go and sit and hear a sermon.
Sure.
And so we live in a community that was highly unchurched. And so I decided that I wanted to start a small group in my living room with people that wouldn't go to church, where the majority were not Christians. And at the same time, I had decided I needed some holes in my own theology filled by going to seminary. So I left the church that we were pastors at, and I enrolled in seminary and was getting an MDiv. And I was starting to see the power of just giving people a safe place to figure out what they believed about God and the Bible. Asking questions, facilitating that process, but being more a guide on the side than a sage on the stage, teaching them about Jesus.
Yeah.
And as this happened, I had 2 other people with me that were doing this as believers, and the rest were non-Christians. And we were seeing the power of these kind of groups to give people a chance to make a decision about Jesus. And in a 5-year period of leading one of these groups, I saw 17 people find a relationship with Jesus. For example, there was a woman named Denise who was a high-driving maritime lawyer who had grown up in the church, but had, again, like myself, had not found a relationship with Jesus. She missed the most important part, the relationship. And as a result, she was coming to these groups every week, and we were talking about the existence of God and who Jesus was. And one time after one of these meetings, about a year into it, she said, you keep talking about this relationship with Jesus. What's that about? And I explained what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, and I used the Young Life, ABC analogy. That A, you admit that you're a sinner. That B, you believe that Jesus is God and that He died for our sins,
Right.
and that He's forgiven us. And C, you commit to follow Jesus. And she says, I want that. And right there in my living room, she made a confession of faith. And she was one of the first of many that did that. And so, but what I learned is that Christians don't have a lot of skills to have this dialogic discussion. That what they've been taught in church is that you have more of a didactic approach, that you proclaim the gospel, you tell them, and it's monologue versus dialogue. And as a result, if people aren't tracking with you, they want to talk rather than listen. And so if they're not tracking with you, you're not going to get the the end goal, which is to have them see Jesus for who he is and his invitation.
Wow. Well, Mary has done quite a bit, not only of thinking about this, but some writing about this as well. And she has a book out called The 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversation. And it was preceded by a couple of workbooks and so on. We're going to be discussing that when we continue here in just a moment. We are going to take a short break and then continue our discussion with Mary Schaller. Again, former high-tech entrepreneur and marketer and author of the book, The 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversations. And we'll continue on moving people forward in just a moment.
God is our safe place and our strength. He is always our help when we are in trouble. This word of God in Psalm 46:1 says it all. God is our safe place. He is our strength. He is our help when we are in trouble. Whenever and wherever we are invited, nationally or internationally, Lutheran Church Charity's mission is to bring the mercy, compassion, presence, and proclamation of Jesus Christ to those who are suffering and in need. LCC is a ministry of presence, to be present with Jesus, to lift up people in times of joy and sorrow, in prayer, and by passing through donations of dollar per dollar to those in need. Through our canine ministries, we respond and deploy with boots on the ground and paws within 24 hours, often sooner, of any crisis or disaster situation we're invited into. You see, for us, the bottom line is making a difference by being present for people who are suffering and in need with that mercy, compassion, presence of Jesus Christ. Thank you again for allowing us the privilege to stand alongside and serve others. Jesus and your partnership make that possible to touch thousands of lives.
This is Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand. We're discussing how to encourage meaningful discussions on the subject of faith in God. And my guest is Mary Schaller, author of The 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversation. But actually, the book was preceded by, well, let's see, at least a couple of other things here. Practicing the 9 Arts, and also the, I guess this is a workbook. Is that what it is?
Well, it's the two of them are, one is like a primer. See, it looks like it's right on the top there. It's like if you want to just try what these 9 practices are that we see in the life of Jesus.
Right.
Noticing, praying, listening, asking questions, loving, welcoming, facilitating, serving together, and sharing. If you want to know why those are important, that first book is a really good start. But if you want to go deeper in any of those practices, then that blue one is got 37 lessons in there, 4 on each one of those practices.
I see.
So if you're going to get good at listening, you're not going to only want to know why listening is important. You're going to want to know why don't you listen? You're going to want to know what does genuine listening look like? And then how do you listen genuinely?
Is this a personal workbook, or would you use this in a small group?
You would use it in a small group. You could use it personally.
Okay.
But we learn best from one another.
Okay.
And ideally, in a small group of even as small as 3, which we call a triad, or a larger small group of maybe 12 Christians that are all on a journey together. A lot of Sunday schools use this.
Okay.
And that workbook actually has been used successfully in CareNet facilities. There's several CareNet facilities that use that entire 37 lesson training to train their new volunteers and their staff on how to interact with people in a crisis, like a crisis pregnancy. So that's just one example. But after writing all of that curriculum to help people have the skills to interact with people who believe differently, Tyndale, the publisher, came to Q-Place and said, have you ever thought of writing a book on those practices just so people understand them without maybe going through all the lessons? And we said, that's a great idea. And so they published that, and it's now in its second printing, The 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversations.
Okay, but you have a co-author here, Jon Crowley. Tell me about who he is.
Well, Jon Crowley was also a part of the ministry that I ended up joining when I graduated from seminary.
Okay.
And so after I graduated from seminary, I ended up trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and I knew it was no longer high tech, it was kingdom. I saw God using my entrepreneurial skills for kingdom work, because the church is changing. It's got to change as the culture changes. I mean, we need to stay central to the gospel, of course, but our ways of interacting with people and bringing them to the gospel are going to adapt to the culture. And so I ended up being asked to head an organization that had been around for, at that time, already maybe like 50 years, called Neighborhood Bible Studies. And it was a ministry that started in 1960. And it was two InterVarsity staff people that saw the value of small groups and inductive Bible study. And so they had really started a lot of these groups, thousands of them all over the world. But the ministry had gone to hard times as the culture changed, and people weren't as interested in studying the Bible. And as a result, they ended up needing a new leader. And I was graduating from seminary at the time, and they asked me to come in and rebrand it and to give it a new chapter of relevance. And so we rebranded it as Q Place. And so Jon Crowley was one of the senior staff that I hired to help rebrand the ministry and to make it relevant to churches and invite churches into this kind of form of relational evangelism and discipleship.
Okay.
And so he was with us about 5 years, and he came from the marketplace, and he went back into the marketplace and continues to use those skills in his everyday interactions with staff and customers in where God's put him.
All right. Well, in the 9 Arts book, before you even get into that, you have a chapter on kind of the heart of Jesus and the habits of Jesus. What's so significant about those aspects of his life that opens the door for relationship with him?
Well, it starts with even the first of the 9 Arts, noticing. You know, Jesus was an incredible noticer, like Zacchaeus up in the tree. If he had not noticed Zacchaeus, you know, as he was walking along, we would never have, and Zacchaeus would have never had the encounter he had with Jesus. Right. Mm-hmm. So Jesus shows us how he is so in tune with the Father, okay, and what the Father values, that he then lives his life in tune with the Father, and so the Spirit of God was prompting him to look at Zacchaeus, or to interact with the woman at the well, or to notice that a woman had touched him. Yes. And so we see all of these things in the life of Jesus that we miss unless we start to identify them. And notice that before Jesus started talking to people about God, that he talked to God about people, okay, which is praying. And so noticing and praying are two practices that we see in the life of Jesus that we don't spend much time thinking about or doing. And the next practice of the 3 and the 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversations is listening, okay? We tend to want to talk before we notice, pray, or listen. Mm-hmm. And those are the first 3 of the 9 Arts. And if you'll, notice, none of those require any words right. coming out of our mouth. Right. They're called getting ready because they get us ready, and they allow us to do a lot of evangelistic related activity without even opening our mouths, which introverts love, because these are all things that they can see as cups of cold water. Like Jesus said, when we give someone a cup of cold water, we will be rewarded. So all of these 9 practices are cups of cold water that we give to a very dry culture that is thirsty for good news.
We only have a couple of minutes left, and I do want to ask you about a very important project that, I don't know, the first time I ever heard about this was from you. So I'm going to say if you could trace all this activity that took place in Chicago and kind of bring it back down to who was behind this or who got this initiated. You were really a key person to this. And how many churches participated in Explore God Chicago?
Well, when all was said and done, we had set a goal of 1,000 churches in Chicago, and there's about 6,000 churches total, you know, across all the denominations.
Sure.
But we were able to get 1,020 churches to preach the 7 big questions about God in the period of January and February 2019.
Right.
And we also asked those churches to mobilize their congregations to go out and invite their friends, their neighbors, their fellow workers to discuss those 7 big questions in small groups during those same 7 weeks. Now, it turned out Chicago had a very big cold spell during that period.
Yes.
But actually, it worked out fine because people were, you know, huddled in homes and places to stay warm, and they were talking about the 7 big questions about God.
Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful outreach. And now, if people, is this continuing to some degree? Can people find out more about this now?
Well, actually, the team that we hired, there was a donor that put in almost $1 million to do billboards, to do advertising, and to pay a special staff to come together to recruit the churches and to train the churches. And that staff ended up wanting to stay together to do something that would continue the collaborative effort of churches and ministries. There were not only 1,000 churches, but there were 20 ministries that worked together. Alpha, Q Place, of course, the Navigators, the Billy Graham Center, Moody Radio. They all worked together to see evangelism become a forefront activity. And that is still continuing under the name of the Chicago Evangelism Team. And if they were interested in talking about that, it would probably be good to talk to somebody at Q Place, or the guy that's heading it is Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Chicago.
Okay.
A guy by the name of Keith Cody.
Okay, but Q Place would be a good place.
Sure,
So what's the
they would know.
website for Q Place?
Well, it's qplace.com.
Okay.
If you're interested in the 9 Arts specifically,
Yes.
there's the 9arts.com is a website to go to see that.
Okay, very good. Well, this has quickly gone by, as
It
we
has.
kind of figured that it would, but thanks, Mary, for giving us some time today to discuss this.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mark. I love
Yeah.
what you're doing to help people move forward.
Well, you're a spiritual gem, so we're glad to have some time with you. And that's going to do it for our program today with our guest, Mary Schaller. As the sages have told us, grow in wisdom, think humbly of yourself, and love one another. And may it be so with you. Join us next time for more of Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand.